my name is Essie Ndem. I'm the 2017-2018 Miss Ibom USA, and I am here with 10 questions with AKISAN's national presidential candidate, Itoro Akpan-Iquot. Itoro Vadia. All right, let's jump right into questions. Given the current situation with COVID-19, what are your thoughts on holding elections this year?
So thank you very much for that question. My opinion is that we should have elections no matter what. Number one, we're in the 21st century. We do not need to wait for anything to happen before we redefine how we do things. Number two, I want to lean back on what our legal counsel said. We were founded in Washington, D.C. As a result, we need to abide by the laws of Washington, D.C., which currently allows for virtual meetings and virtual elections. So by that token, we can hold our elections. We can discuss the modalities later, but first things first, we need to hold those elections come August.
So over the years, there is a presumption that AKISAN presidents are in office for personal gain. How can we trust that you will be any different?
So I get that question a lot. One thing I like to stress when I talk to people on chapters is, whenever people are looking for a job or if you're in a position to hire people, the first thing you do is to look at what they bring to the table, so their experience, what's on their resume. And I challenge anyone to look at the resumes of myself and my other two opponents, and they'll come up with the same conclusion that I have the most experience of the three. Now, does that take away the human factor? No, but it gives you a better understanding of how these people are likely to govern. We need to see, what do they do for a living? How they interact with people. Have they had any issues, whether it's personally or with the law, among other things? When we get all these things together, we can have, like I said, a better picture as to how that person would react. We can also, in my opinion, have what we have, like at my job, an employee manual. Those things spell out what employees can and cannot do. So for example, let's say we go back to Akwa State for, let's say, to celebrate the birthday of Akwa State. We can put in there something to the effect that you cannot accept any gifts from any government officials without declaring it. Or maybe we flat out refuse it. And so when we build these things into our system, the hope is that over time we're able to iron out all those kinks. Because yes, there is that perception that people are always vying to be president so that they can see what they can get out of the system. So we need to make sure we discourage that so we can actually get people who actually want to serve becoming president.
All right, so tell us about yourself.
So I was born in Stillwater, Oklahoma. My parents are Dr. and Mrs. Itoro Akpan-Iquot, also of the Atlanta area. I left here when I was 7 years old. I came back in 1993. I came primarily to go back to college, and in 1999, I got a bachelor's degree in computer science from Georgia Tech.
Nice.
Currently, I'm a senior web developer. I enjoy reading, traveling, and playing soccer, and I'm married with 5 children. On the AKISAN side, I've been involved locally and nationally for over 10 years. I began as a PRO in Atlanta, and I gradually raised to become a vice president and then a president. During my time as president, I oversaw the renovation of Akwa House, which was about a $36,000 project. Currently, because of that project, even though it was done in 2015, we now make about $3,000 per month. When you consider that the utilities are about $1,600, the house is paying for itself. I also ensure that we increase the number of people involved in our life insurance program. I also involved the chapter in creating a July 4th picnic and an end-of-year party so as to bring people together, not just under the pretext of meetings and fundraisers. So at the national level, I've been your webmaster since 2009, and I've served the association faithfully ever since. 6 national presidents in the process. I've been a member of convention planning committees going back to 2010 with the exception of last year. I've attended national conventions going back to 1997. And perhaps the crown jewel of my accomplishments at the national level is when I was the coordinator of the 2017 AKISAN National Convention in my hometown of Atlanta. During that convention, we witnessed many firsts. Number one was we got a net profit of $160,000. Number two, I installed a system on our website that will allow people to pay online. And so for the first time, we raised over $30,000 in convention registration alone. I also introduced Facebook live streaming. Over the course of the convention, over 300,000 unique hits were recorded, and this can be verified on Facebook. We also increased the number of ads in our booklet. Usually we got about 100 pages on average, but that year we had about 130. So those are a few of the things that we did during that convention.
This next question is really built on experiences and values. So what experience experiences have you had that have helped you deeply understand the values and mindset of the AKISAN culture?
So fortunately, like I said, I was born here in the United States. When we went back home, my parents insisted that no one talk to us in English. And so that forced my sister and I to learn our language. Even though I came back to the United States, I've been able to go back home on a regular basis. And when I go home, I don't just sit in my home or go to certain places. I go to the villages, I interact with the people. So I feel that between the fact that I was born here gives me that perspective from an American side. The fact that I spent about 12, 13 years back in Nigeria during my formative years, and the fact that I go home again on a regular basis ever since gives me that perspective from people back at home. So I'm not just here in America and I cut off all contact with people back at home. I'm in constant communication with them. I find out how they're doing. I figure out what their problems are, try to help as much as I can. So again, I come from the American side and I come from the Nigerian side. And I think that's what people identify with me the most.
So you spoke a lot earlier about distrust. And so if elected, what measures will you take to raise confidence and restore trust in AKISAN?
So my administration will be 100% totally transparent one. What do I mean by that? Especially in the area of finances, which is where most of our issues are. I'll make sure that it's totally open. Currently, we only release, for example, financial reports every 6 months. But as chapter presidents, we release these reports every month. So I'm going to introduce that. It's not required, but I'm going to do that again for total transparency. That way, if people have a question about a particular month, they don't have to wait till the council meeting to get those questions answered. I mentioned projects also earlier, so I'm not going to ask for a blank check. I will come up with my figures up front. I'm going to tell you what I want to do and why it is necessary for us to do that. Of course, council will have questions, which I don't mind. We're going to go back and forth over the numbers. I'll go through the proper channels, get the approvals, and then I'll push the board for disbursement of those funds. So I'm not going to run a unilateral or an autocratic system. I'm going to involve everybody, because when you involve everybody, that's one. Two, you're totally transparent. Three, you do what you say you're going to do, the trust will eventually get back. And that is exactly what I want to see with AKISAN.
So how will your tenure affect Akwa Ibom students scattered over the country?
Okay, so currently AKISAN gives out scholarships on an annual basis. Unfortunately, we do not necessarily follow through. So for example, maybe if we give someone a scholarship in say 2010, we haven't gotten back to them to ask them where they are. Did they even take full advantage of those scholarships? What are they doing currently? That goes back to transparency. So if I gave money in 2010 on the understanding that we're going to sponsor someone's education, yet I do not see a product of where my money went, that'll make me not want to donate in the future. So education is very important, obviously, especially the IT field, because everything to me is going on computers. But again, in my administration, the scholarships will be measured. I'm going to set up a specific scholarship committee made up of experts in the system in the United States who are involved in giving out scholarships in their various areas of employment. Before we give you the scholarship, you actually have to qualify for the scholarships. And when we give you the scholarships, we're going to follow through until the end. And if it's possible, I would like to bring at least one of those students here to the United States so that people can see where their money went. Worst case, I can make a video, a short video with these recipients once they're done with their education, so that again, people can see where their money went and hopefully will be encouraged to even sponsor more children.
So AKISAN is known to conduct medical missions. Will your administration continue this measure?
So at first thought, I wanted to cancel the whole idea of medical missions. But then when I thought about it again, there are people who genuinely need help. The issue with our medical missions is not the medical mission itself. It's the way it's being administered. So again, it goes back to what I said I do when I do projects. So one, again, I hate to reiterate, but I think it makes sense to do so. I will not ask for a blank check. Whatever I want to do, I will explain why I need to do that. Another issue that we have in the area of medical mission is we tend to focus on senatorial districts. And for the most part, we're doing these things in Rio, Itoro Akpan-Iquot. But Akwa Ibom has 31 local government areas. So I want to get rid of that concept of senatorial districts and conduct these medical missions in each of the local governments. Maybe this year we pick 3, next year we pick 3. Eventually we're going to go around to everybody so that everyone is well represented. AKISAN is not made up of people from 3 or 4 local government areas. They're from 31, and we need to take care of each of those. I know the argument is that not all areas have the same facilities, but guess what? There are people who are too poor to move from, let's say, the hinterlands to, I don't know, here to get treatment. We need to go out to where they are. Okay. Another thing I want to do is to have programs in the medical mission that hopefully prevent the very reason why people are coming. So that goes to awareness programs. If I bring experts in who educate the people on why, for example, you need to maintain your blood pressure, or you don't need to eat certain foods so you don't get diabetes, maybe that will prevent the number of cases of those people who come in for treatment. So again, I will continue the medical mission, but I'm going to involve a lot of changes. One in the area of awareness, and also in terms of our outreach. So not focusing on certain local governments, but involving everybody.
So as AKISAN's presidential candidate, what is your definition of leadership?
So leadership to me is about solving problems. And right now, unfortunately, AKISAN has a few. So number one is in the area of trust, as I mentioned earlier. Number two is in the area in which we handle our finances, the way we handle our projects. So as president, when it comes to projects, I'll make sure I don't ask council for a blank check. I'm going to come up with figures, I'm going to defend those figures, and at the end of the project, I will render a complete financial report, complete with invoices and receipts. In the area of unity, I'm going to engage everybody, because it's when you engage everybody that you're able to get what the problems are, that way you can solve the right problems. And when people see that you do what you say you're going to do, they're going to rally around you, and before you know it, AKISAN will be where it wants to be. I also want to make sure that AKISAN is the pride of Akwa in the United States, and by extension around the world. I also want to make sure that AKISAN is the best Nigerian non-profit organization in the United States. I know those are tall orders, but based on my experience running AKISAN in Atlanta, I know I can bring the same experience to the table to make sure those things happen.
Well, I know you just mentioned a few, but I want you to go into a little bit more detail on what you hope to accomplish as president.
So as president, I want to make sure that we find avenues of saving money, and that means we have to cut costs no matter what. I want to make sure that if there are projects that we execute, that they're totally transparent. I want to make sure in the area of finances that no one ever has any reason to ask where their money is going or why it was spent a certain way. As president, I also want to make sure that I involve the youth, and it's not just lip service. I want to make sure that they're actually involved, totally ingrained in the association. So for example, in the Constitution, I would like to amend it to make sure that the youth have one vote at the very least. I also want to make sure that our women play a more active role in our association. So by the time you add the regular members, you add the women, you add the youth, engaging everybody, before you know it, AKISAN will be where it needs to be.
If given a chance to amend AKISAN's constitution without interference, what would you change and why?
That's probably the best question so far. So I'm of the opinion that if you want to build a new house where one currently exists, you have two choices. So of course you raise the building, but then you could either build a house with with the debris, or you can build it with brand new materials. And it seems with AKISAN right now, we're just building with the blocks that were blown up. That's why we're having all these issues. I want to totally restructure the association, beginning with the Constitution, and there are many areas. So for example, council doesn't have a lot of oversight in the area of finances and discipline. In order for that to happen, I want all the 3 branches of our government, as I like to call that, so from the exco to the board to the council, to be co-equals. We should all be equal. The president currently is like over everything. To me, that's not right. The way we vote at council meetings needs to change as well. So we elect a president, the president appoints the executives, yet when we go to council meetings between the executives and the president, they have 6 votes automatically. And that to me is not fair, because if I have something that I have bias about, I have 6 guaranteed votes. I also mentioned the area of the youth. I feel the reason why the youth feel that they're not impacted is because no one approaches them for anything. It's kind of like a taxation without representation. So I want to build in the Constitution the role of the youth in our society. We need to define what age, so you can't be, let's say, 40-something and say you are a youth. It has to be within a certain age range. Then how does that relate with respect to AKISAN as a whole? Finally, I want to be able to give the youth at least one vote, because I feel that when they have that one vote, then they know that people will actually come to them, hear what they have to say. They could even organize debates, for example, and basically become relevant. And I think that will attract even more youth. Another area that I want to see is the area of extension of the president's term. Now that might be controversial, but I think it makes sense, because right now we serve just one term of 2 years and that's it. So there's nothing, technically, if you're not motivated to do anything, you can just sit there without doing anything and then you leave. If you have the ability to be re-elected, then that means you can have challengers. So you'll be forced to do something. And of course, defend your, unless you don't want to run again, but defend what you did in your first term to justify why you need to be elected in the second term. So I'm going to institute a constitution committee from day one. I'm going to involve, and that's another problem. We tend to have about 9-10 people in these committees. Sometimes it's tilted towards a particular chapter. I want to involve every single chapter, because the interests of LA, for example, are not the same interests as Atlanta. So everyone will have a seat at the table to come up with the perfect, hopefully the perfect constitution for the association.
So how are you going to merge a lot of those differing wants and desires from each chapter?
So right now, like I said earlier, there's about 36 chapters. From my experience, and I stand corrected, chapters in certain regions tend to think a certain way. So I wouldn't see it as, let's say, 36 chapters having 36 different views. After all, in the United States, for example, when they had the Constitutional Convention, there were 13 colonies. There were some things that they all rallied around. And in cases where there were some issues, so for example, the New Jersey Compromise, we can get together and compromise on those things. So another controversial area is the issue of one chapter, one vote. It makes sense in terms of cutting down with respect to fraud. However, large chapters like Atlanta might say are larger than, let's say, New Jersey. Why should we have the same number of delegates as them? So we can come to the table, sit down and have that compromise, and at the end of the day, we'll come up with something. But we need to have something, because it's the lack of that something that is giving us the many issues that we're experiencing currently.
Okay. All right, so we have come to the end of our interview, but I just want to give you an opportunity to share your final thoughts with AKISAN members, AKISAN diaspora, and whoever else you want to give a message to.
Definitely. So first of all, thank you for the opportunity to interview. I really appreciate that. I know you have a lot on your plate. First and foremost, I want to thank our healthcare professionals amongst us. You guys get up every day, put your lives at risk in order to make people like me safe. And for that, I want to say thank you for your service to humanity. The association is going through some very unique times. Who would have thought we'd have a situation where we were not able to have a convention for the first time, I would say, since the association was founded. We took the first bold step in canceling the convention that was supposed to take place in Houston. Right now, there's a lot of discussion around elections, but I'd like to remind everybody that, as the legal counsel said, the association was founded in Washington, D.C. What does that mean? That means we abide by the laws of Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. allows for virtual elections and meetings, and we need to go with that. We need to start thinking outside the box. We don't need to wait for a situation like COVID-19 to make us look at things in a different way. As your president, I promise to engage each and every one of you. Worst case, we agree to disagree, but I'm not the only person in the room. I also promise to bring more transparency in the area of finances in particular. I promise to restructure the Constitution to, among others, give the council more oversight over finances and discipline, make sure that everyone is co-equal, give our youth a well-defined role within the organization, and to involve our women. In the area of projects, where we're doing them currently like medical missions and the scholarships, I promise to streamline them such that everyone knows where their money is going. I also want to bring in brand new and fresh ideas. I want to restore the trust that has been lost over the years in this association. I don't need to speak for myself. Pick up the phone and call anyone you know in Atlanta, and I promise you, you will not be disappointed. So give me that vote on August 8th, and once again, I promise that it's a vote you will not regret. Thanks, and remain blessed.